You enjoying these podcasts, John?
Yeah, these have been great. Yeah, it's been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of interesting people, and I joke that like the podcast is the new cold email. It lets you reach out to people and say like, hey, let's have a Zoom call.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how folks end up saying, yeah, sure, let's do it. So.
Right.
Joe, I'm just going to cut your video for now as we do the recording. So welcome, Joe. We'll bring folks on at the end for questions. Looks like I got Amy, got a few other people here in the chat. So I'm excited to get started here for this week's edition of Leadmore Live with my good friend, Rick Melmer. How are you, Rick?
Good, John. How about you?
We're doing well.
Yeah.
We had Rick on the podcast, gosh, maybe episode 7 or 8, pretty early now. It was in the summer. Felt like a different world then. Time is so crazy now. So Rick is the, what word do you use? The president, founder?
Director.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Director of Leadership South Dakota, an amazing program here in South Dakota that I participated a few years ago in. Tell us about, I love the origin story, so I'll have you tell it again, like where it came from and where you got the idea.
Yeah, Valerie and I, my wife and I are friends with a couple from Wyoming, and we were visiting them on their ranch in Chugwater, which is north of Cheyenne, a very small little community in Wyoming. And Dan was telling us about Leadership Wyoming and his experience with it and how much he enjoyed it. And at that time, Valerie and I were at a stage where we were kind of interested in trying to figure out what would be next for us as a couple and me in particular. And so we came back and decided, let's start talking to people about this idea in South Dakota, Leadership South Dakota, modeling it largely after Wyoming. And we got a little early traction, got some folks that thought the idea was worthwhile, and some funders and South Dakota Community Foundation, Bush Foundation came on with some nice funds to help us get started. And we're now in our 7th class. We have 250 alums. We'll have about 300 alums at the end of this year. And it's going great. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity. It's really a fun program to be involved with.
That's great. And how many states in the country have a program like this?
Oh, I would say about half do, John, like 25 to 30. And most of them look like us, but some of them are, like unique to women, or some of them are unique to a vocation like ag.
Agriculture,
yeah. But most of them are like us. And of course, most of them have been around for 15 or 20 or 30 years. We're in year 7. So we're still learning from a lot of those that have been around a lot longer than we have.
Yeah. And then you have a lot of city programs. I know here in Sioux Falls, Leadership Sioux Falls or Rapid City, that exists as well. Yep.
Right.
Cool. Well, what I wanted, you and I could go about leadership for a couple hours, I'm guessing. But one thing that you do take people through in the program that you're particularly pretty adept at is the DISC assessment as a tool, and probably more so a vehicle to kind of unleash what you already have, your talents and strengths as a leader. So I know people have done, Strengths Finder, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC. What is it that you like about DISC? Or maybe first start, just give us the lowdown on it.
Yeah. Well, DISC is, of course, it's the DISC. So there's 4 kind of primary styles. Most people are some sort of a blend of more than one of those. But what I like about the DISC is it's 4. It's not 32. It's not 9 or 10 or, it's like a really simple, like 4 quadrants that you kind of can live in, with your primary style being in one and maybe a secondary style being in another. And so not only is that easy for people to understand about themselves, but even more importantly, I think it gives you a context for how to approach other people and go, okay, this is a key client for me. This is a key colleague that I need to get along with. Who do I think they are on the DISC? And if you're trained in it, you have a general understanding of it. And you don't have to try to sort through a whole long list of possibilities. It's 4. And you can kind of go, I kind of think they're here. And therefore, the best way for me to communicate and work with them is going to be this. So I just find the simplicity of it and sort of the application of it can really be helpful in the workplace and at home.
Yeah, and the 4 categories are the DISC.
So D is the dominant category, and that's that sort of driver, do it now, kind of fast paced, and really sort of decisive. Everything's a problem to be solved. the good qualities are they're decisive, they're courageous, they're not afraid. The challenging part will be sometimes don't listen as well to other people. Their pacing can be a little faster than some people would like. And so we've talked about this, John, but we like to say your strength overplayed is a weakness. So if you're admired for your decisiveness, that's great. But if you decide you don't need to listen to anybody else and you can make all the decisions, that's a problem, right? So you have to always kind of balance that strength, that superpower that you like to talk about, to make sure it doesn't become a weakness. The I is more that what I would call sales profile, very optimistic, very enthusiastic, can talk to anybody about anything, very external focused, people oriented. Again, the downside might be follow through can be a challenge at times. Maybe
attention to
talking
detail
too much and not listening enough, would be the pro and the con for that style. Both the D and the I tend to be faster paced. So they're like move forward, make it happen, tend to be more forward thinking, not so much reflective. They look out the windshield. They don't look in the rearview mirror. They're only looking out the windshield, right? So that's the DI styles. And then on the bottom of the quadrant is that SC. S is that more team orientation, kind of low maintenance. They show up, they do the work. They like to be a part of a team, like they're rule followers. They tend to do really well as long as they know what the rules and guidelines are. And they're relatively conflict free. So they're easy to have around, good team members. Downside would be they tend to be a little bit focused on stability. If you interrupt their rhythm and routine, that doesn't always go over well. And then they can avoid conflict. So if they're having a problem with somebody, it might be a Cold War, rather than kind of saying, I gotta go deal with that. They'll just kind of harbor it and ruminate over it. And then the C style is also at the bottom, and that's that perfectionistic, high attention to detail, introverted style. That again, great to have on a team. They dot I's, they cross T's, they check people's work. Downside can be very slow processors, tend to be perfectionists, and if other people aren't, they don't understand that. They struggle with imperfection because they're kind of focused on getting it right. So anyway, there's pros and cons to all four styles, but as we've talked about, the best teams have a little of each.
Yeah, and typical where someone might have a primary and then maybe bleed into a second of the quadrant, right? Kind of a secondary strength.
Right. And actually, some people are pretty clear, like if you have that DC, we look at those two as being kind of task oriented. So if you have a CD or DC style, I can pretty much tell you that person's going to be all task, focused on the task, and they're going to struggle at times with sort of the people part of the job. If you're on the other side, that IS or SI, they have a tendency to be a little bit more people oriented, and then the task always gets secondary billing because it's like, let's make sure the people are being taken care of. And frankly, you and I both know you need a blend of both to kind of make it all work. And that's why that team aspect can really be healthy if you're paying attention to, let's make sure that we're getting the right folks on our team that can bring all styles to the table.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. And I know when you start Leadership South Dakota, you have everybody take the assessment. And what I wanted to ask you is whether it be, I always love things like that. I love doing the Strengths Finder. I love the Enneagram. You step back, we don't step back and reflect enough, but then there's always like the now what feeling of like, okay, so now how do I use this? And I think at least with Leadership South Dakota, a lot of it is just being self-aware, like recognizing I tend to do this, and that might be because I am a DI or a SC, or how do you then help teams, companies, leaders apply their score, their profile?
Yeah. That's really a good question, John. And I think it's a primary challenge that we face or I face in this world of DISC, because a lot of times I'll run into an organization that'll go, yeah, we want to get our people to take this DISC thing and kind of get to know each other, and that's great. But then I'll always say to them, can I come back in 3 months? Like, can I do the training? And then I want to come back in 3 months and just make sure that this is something that you're paying attention to. Because, you can do the training if you want, but if you just put it on the shelf and go, yeah, we did that last year and we'll do something different next year, that's not really going to be as helpful as kind of going, so what does this mean for us? What does it mean for our team? What does it mean for me? So what we like to say in the DISC work is it's kind of 51% about you and 49% about everybody else. So the first thing is like, what do I know about myself? What's my default leadership style? And then what do I need to do about that to make me the best leader I can possibly be? And that means emphasizing your strengths and recognizing that I'm good at some of these things and I need to play to those strengths. But I also have to pay attention to the areas that are hard for me and make sure that either I'm having other people compensate for it, or I'm making a noted effort to compensate for it by saying I'm going to be better at that. One of the things that's coming up a lot now through this pandemic has been that folks that have strong DI tendencies, again, future focused, they like variety, they enjoy sort of things, quick decisions and move on. They're managing themselves better in this pandemic because every day is a new day. They get a chance to say, what's tomorrow going to bring? That'll be kind of exciting to find out what tomorrow's going to bring. Whereas the SC style is much more like, I want to know what tomorrow's going to be like and next week's going to be like. Well, guess what? Nobody knows what tomorrow's going to be like. Nobody knows what next week's going to be like. So I always tell leaders, if you have the DI and you're working with people that are SC, just realize they're nervous every day, wondering what tomorrow is going to be like. And you might say this is a fun adventure we're all on together, but other people don't see it the same way. So one is, know yourself, understand yourself, make sure that you're recognizing that about yourself, but also applying that to other people in your life and kind of going, everybody's not like me. And I have to, the best leaders figure out how to motivate the other person, not like expect them to come your way, but you go their way to make them the best version of themselves. So.
Yeah, it's I've heard it described as be the lighthouse versus like the tugboat, right? Like kind of guide people your way versus pulling them. Yeah. Right. What you mentioned it there. I was going to ask you, do you think you're more in the camp of delegate and offset your weaknesses with other people, or can you take a weakness and make it a strength?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can take a weakness and make it a strength, or take a strength and manage it a little bit better. I think we're all capable of that. The biggest issue is like, are you aware of it, first of all?
Yeah.
And second of all, do you keep it front and center, and make sure that you're paying attention to the idea that I've got to remember to slow down. I've got to remember to speak up. I've got to remember to listen to people more because I tend to be fast paced. I mean, if that becomes something that you remind yourself of regularly, and that's to me, the value of training a group of people, is it gives you permission to talk to other people about their style. Instead of if you're a strong, a perfectionist, it gives me permission to be able to go, well, John, I know when we did that disc training, you're a perfectionist, but sometimes we have to let go and move a little faster. It sort of allows you permission to talk to people about the things that might, under normal circumstances, be tough conversations to have. And I think it's especially true for supervisors and direct reports. It gives you permission to say, hey, let's go back to the disc that that we did 6 months ago. Here's what it says about you. How do you feel about that? You think this? And most people are going to own it. Yeah, that's me. That's who I am. Well, let's talk about what we can do about that to make that a little better for our organization. So the joint training and the team training, I think, really gives people that common platform to say, let's talk about this on a regular, ongoing basis instead of just having it be a one-time event.
Yeah, that common language, I think, is so important. We've recognized that. We did Strengths Finder here at Lemonly, and one person on our leadership team is a context, which the adjective of like she wants all the information before, like really wants the download before we make a decision. Whereas I probably fall more into that. Let's go, let's make it, let's next thing. And so it's not that either one is wrong, right? It's just that understanding that now we can talk about it. So,
Another thing that we think is important, John, about the DISC, and it could be about anything, by the way, is, are you in the right vocation? Are you in the right role that fits your style? Because I feel like if people are in jobs or roles that might be a real challenge for them on a natural basis, I don't mean they can't do it, but it can be exhausting if you spend all day sort of living a life that isn't really who you are. And we have encountered people that through the Leadership South Dakota program and through the DISC work have kind of come back and said, I feel like I need to kind of look at something else that would be a better fit for my style and who I am as a person. And our experience has been they're happier when they find that sweet spot where they kind of wake up every day going, I'm built to do this every day. I mean, for example, there's been a couple of folks that we've had that have had really strong kind of DI tendencies, and they're in nonprofits. And nonprofits tend to be, a breeding ground for SC styles: slow, steady, predictable, we all get paid the same. There's a rhythm to what we do. Your world would be very different than that, right? At Lemonly, it's kind of much more creative, make things happen. Yep. And so their energy level would be maybe a little different. So some people that maybe have a DI are in a nonprofit and they're going, this is killing me. Like everything takes forever. Well, you probably need to get into an environment where you're rewarded for your efforts. You're in a creative environment where you can sort of bounce ideas off of people. And then the converse, people that are SC or in a Lemonly and kind of going, man, the pace is fast and I feel overwhelmed. Well, maybe you need to kind of dial back a little bit and go, what can I do to sort of slide into an environment that I'm a little better suited for?
Yeah, that's so good. And that actually was going to be my next question, was sort of that some practical world life examples, which you just gave. I was curious, have you ever worked with, or do organizations at the leadership level say, okay, our great CEO is retiring. Here's what we know about our CEO. Here's what we know about our team. We want to make sure we find a blank. Like, have you ever consulted or worked with companies who use this as like a filter for hiring or a search?
I have. Yep, there have been a couple of them. Now, again, you can't just decide, we need an I, so we're going to go hire an I.
Yeah.
But I think the idea would be, we need a people person. We need somebody that's really good with people. And so that's sort of that left or the right side of the disc, right? The IS. And all they know is we need to find somebody that, can meet people, greet people, and make people feel a part of the organization. Other side of it is we also have seen people or organizations have said, we've got to find somebody that can manage projects.
Flip it.
Yeah, make sure that they can get the work done and make it all happen. Unfortunately, John, what I've seen more often than not is organizations do the pendulum effect. Like whatever we had, we want something different than that now, because they're too task oriented. We want a people person. They're too people oriented. We want somebody that's going to get something done. So they have a tendency to see it kind of go back and forth a little bit. But I think it's still a good idea to kind of go, what did we have and what do we need? And if we need something, and all of us say there's certain periods of time where you might need somebody that's more people oriented. In fact, I think it just happened in our presidential election.
I was gonna say, this makes me think of politics. Yeah.
I mean, you hate to bring that up to anybody because it's polarizing in every sense of the word. But we had a person that was a D, and I think we now have somebody that's a lot more on the IS side, on the people feeling side, right? So I think the country just did it. I think we just kind of said, this is what we had, and this is now what we want, and we're going to kind of do it. And I think organizations do it all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And whether it's conscious or subconscious, I'm sure that
right.
There's a natural pendulum. Well, we'll move into opening up for questions here. I know in the chat, Amanda says that they took a disc at her old job, and it was a huge wake-up call that she realized she wasn't in the right spot anymore. So,
great! I love hearing those kind of stories.
Yeah, that's great. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to, we can turn your audio or video on. And while we're waiting for some of those, remind me of yours. I think you're on the SC side, right?
I'm an SC, and so S is primary, C is secondary, and S is that sort of stable, steady, reliable, dependable. But also, conflict is not my friend. I don't always value it. I don't always appreciate it the way I should. I'm trying to get better at it. And to me, someone like me has to ramp up for conflict management. Like, you got to recognize this is hard for me. This isn't my nature, but I have to do it. It's an important conversation for me to have. And so I've got to prepare for it, be ready to go, develop my rationale. And to me, that's where I missed out as a younger leader, is not knowing that and just kind of assuming that maybe I could run from it, or that, it'll go away. Instead of kind of going, I can't run from this. This is going to be here today and tomorrow. So my job is to ramp up, prepare, and be ready to engage.
Yeah, and as a principal, superintendent, and then secretary of education, you certainly had some conflict, I'm sure.
Absolutely, right. The beauty for me in the nonprofit world was I normally had time to think about it, like time to plan. Like I said, nonprofits tend to move a little slower, a lot of points of no. In there. So I had a lot of opportunity to sort of plan and prepare for it. And that helped me. It was a better fit for me than if I live in your world and have to sort of make quick decisions on a regular basis. So
Sure.
your style would be a
that's
little
good.
different, John, right? You'd be more on the upper side of the disc.
Yeah, I'm an I and then a D. I primary and D secondary.
Right.
I don't think I'm great at conflict and having some of those harder conversations, but in terms of D, in terms of like guiding and directing, I feel comfortable doing that. But I would be the classic I in the sense of sometimes follow through or attention to detail. Maybe I just want to like, have the coffee and have a conversation, give a hug and, some
Right.
of those
Right.
people skills. Yeah. So,
But that's where someone like you can say out loud to your team members, hey, folks, I sometimes struggle. I have good ideas. I like to kind of, take action, but I sometimes need to make sure I follow through. Help me with that. Hold me accountable for that. If I say I'm going to do something and maybe it hasn't happened as quickly as you think, don't be afraid to come back. And again, once everybody knows everybody else's styles, you then have permission to talk to each other about it.
yeah.
And I feel like it really empowers people to say, especially if the leader says, I want you to tell me if I'm not doing something that I said I was going to do, because sometimes I'm so focused on the next thing that I forget about what I said I was going to do, a mile back.
Yeah, definitely guilty of that. So yeah, let's open up for the chat. I saw Lisa join. Lisa, we talked about you earlier. Was that before we went live, but we were talking about the challenges of school board right now and making tough decisions. So Lisa was in my class of Leadership South Dakota and is a leader. Here we go. Amy says, the first time I took a DISC assessment, I was an IS, but when around strong D personality, she said she flips to an SI. Mm-hmm. Is that something that can happen where other people influence their score?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've become more of a style that we need to have to survive, and the DS would be opposites. So sometimes when you have a strong D, you have a tendency to counter that person by saying that I have to compensate by being in a little different style, especially if you have some flexibility. And the ISSI would be, sort of first cousins, right? They're identical in so many ways. They're both people oriented. The I tends to be a little faster, the S a little slower. So if you have a boss that's a strong D and they're moving fast, maybe a little even too fast for you, then your natural state is going to be to say, I'm going to pull back and try to slow this train down a little bit to make sure that we're bringing other people along with us. S's are very concerned about everybody else. How's the team doing? So if I'm a strong D leader and I want to know how people are doing, I find an S and say, how do you think people are doing here? They're going to tell you because they're paying attention. They're watching everybody all the time, and they're going to be that barometer or thermometer to tell you, here's what the temperature's like in the organization right now. Because sometimes D's can be a little tone deaf to some of that.
Sure, I buy that. Yeah. Lisa's here. I'm guessing you have something you want to say. We were talking about you, so we'll give you the chance.
Hey guys, thanks. I'm actually, it's funny you said school board because I'm late because I'm doing simultaneous meetings right now. We have a big school board assembly lobby thing today. So, but I was grabbing something that I found really helpful, and I don't know if others have this also, but when I took the full DISC assessment, when I was at Avera, they did like the full shebang. And I broke mine apart and did this. Let me see if I can't figure out how to switch my camera. Oh, there it is. I made this for myself and I hung it up on my desk. And it just says, I'm an ID, that top little black dot, no surprises there. And then I just wrote some things that I typed specifically about me. I'm independent. I enjoy a challenge. Trust me with new opportunities. I'm action oriented. And I just wrote a few little points about myself that maybe aren't defined specifically by that letter. And then on the back, it has some ways to work with a D, ways to work with an I. And I found those really helpful and a nice little reminder that I just kept on my desk. So just something to think about. That's all I got.
That's great, good. Lisa. Yeah, I've worked with some companies that have the 4 dots or the 4 colors up on their like cubicle or place where it's displayed where they work, and then they've circled or identified which ones they are. You could take the disc and put the dot like Lisa's did where you are. And to me, that's also that visual reminder for coworkers as they walk around to kind of go, okay, that's right, that's where Lisa is or whatever. And some people fight that, like, hey, I don't want to be labeled. don't tell me I'm a D or don't tell me I'm an I. But I think
Sure.
the healthiest organizations sort of own it and decide, you know what, this is who I am, and I want people to know that. And I think we can work more effectively with one another if we pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's sort of just like it's like seeing a stoplight, right? You just kind of remember, oh yeah, okay. Maybe when you see that little visual, I think that cue is smart. Joe's got a great question, which I know the answer to because I've asked you this before, and I think it's a fascinating answer. So he said he took it 8 years ago. Do they change, or are they generally permanent? And is there a benefit from taking it again? And this is, I know, a great answer.
Yeah, my experience has been, no, they really don't change very much. I mean, what might happen, I'm going to pick on Amy because she has like an IS, but if she took it 10 years later, she could maybe be an SI. I mean, you find people that maybe deviate a little bit because on the first assessment, they were working with somebody else and they were an IS, and then they've spent 8 years under a D. And they feel like now I've become more of an SI because I'm trying to slow some things down. I think we're going too fast. So I do think that the environment can cause us to sort of tweak it a little bit. But I've had people, I've worked with, I bet I've had 30 or 40 people say, hey, I took it 10 years ago. I'm going to take it again. And then I always ask them, so tell me, and they said, yeah, it's almost the same or almost identical, occasionally a little bit different. My experience, John, has been, and Joe, people just don't change much. So you might tweak it a little bit one way or another based on some environmental factors. But for the most part, if we're pretty heavy task when we're 25, we're going to be pretty heavy task when we're 55. And the same with people. And if we're slow processors, that's not going to change overnight. So I have a tendency to say people pretty much remain the same. Now, I've had a couple of cases where individuals.
Yeah, this is the part that's so interesting.
I've probably done 3,000, 4,000 of these overall in trainings. And I've had a couple of folks lose young children. One in particular I'm thinking about right now, a mother who lost a young child. And she told me afterwards, I think I'm a different person today than I was before. And it's because of the loss of my child. And I couldn't agree more that life-altering events could cause somebody to, and I'll pick on, like, if I'm heavy task, I lose a child, I might go, I'm not going to do that anymore. I mean, life's too short, or, whatever. And that was kind of her example, as I used to be focused on a lot of kind of work-related things and tasks, getting work done. And now I just understand the value of relationships and how important that is. So I think life-altering events can cause our DISC to shift pretty significantly, or any personality profile. But I think for the most part, we are who we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's so fascinating. And that makes sense, that those life-altering events. I know StrengthsFinder, like you said, there's 32 or 35 words, I think it is. So those can shuffle a little bit. I've done it. I had to do it at my first job at 22 years old in a corporate job. But then when I did it 5 years later as a young founder, they moved around a little bit.
Right.
But even with 4, it sounds like you certainly are who you are.
Yeah.
Any other great questions? I know Rick knows this stuff inside and out, so this is your time to ask Rick about DISC. The one that I wanted to throw out there is relationships, like romantic relationships, partners, marriage. What do you find in terms of, like, I'm sure you know Valerie's, your lovely wife, who's helpful and also involved in the program.
Right.
What do you typically do? Is it opposites attract? Is it similar, or what do you see from that standpoint?
Valerie and I have actually done, over the last probably 5 or 6 years, we've done some premarital counseling with a handful of couples. And it's in the last couple, I've had them do the DISC just out of curiosity. And our experience has been opposites attract. People find and tend to be attracted to people that are different than them, at least in the marriage arena. Almost every couple we've worked with are very different, not completely different, but significantly different. And it tends to fall on the task relationship quadrant. One tends to be more relationship oriented, the other more task oriented. And that would be true for Valerie and I. She's more relationship, I would be more task. And that would be true for the couples that we've worked with. And I when I was talking to somebody about why that is, and I think the feeling was, people said, we tend to admire qualities that we don't have. And so when it comes to looking for a future mate, we might sort of look at people and go, I wish I was more like that, so I'm going to marry that. And then, maybe it'll help me.
Rub off on me.
And so that's been our experience, is that we tend to find people that are different than us. And sometimes, to Amy's point earlier, the differences are exaggerated because the longer we live with someone that is a strong in one area, we have to compensate and modify our behavior to make sure that we have both bases covered. So I think some of that can happen as well. But at the end of the day, I think we're attracted to people that are a little different than us. I admire Ds as leaders, always have, love their decisiveness. I love their kind of forward thinking, don't look back, courageous. I'm none of that. I'm always taking the temperature to find out how are people feeling, how are they doing, is everybody okay? So you always have that tendency to admire people like that. But if I had to work under a really strong D all the time, my admiration might go down a lot, because all of a sudden I find some of the things that I don't care about and I don't want. And that's what happens in a marriage.
Yeah, interesting. And I wonder if, do you feel that it seems like the prototype of a CEO or a leader in America is probably more D, but I wonder if we're seeing a shift culturally, or just maybe they always were out there, we just didn't know about them as much. But like, if you were to survey CEOs or politicians or typical leaders, I think here at Leadmore we believe that leaders come all different titles and different ages. But do you think there's one that tends to be in the seat or the role on the bus more often?
Yeah, that's a good point, John. I think the old style leadership was more that D, kind of the military style of, top down, this is how we're doing it, command and control. And I think we're evolving into a very different view of a leader, more inclusive, more bringing people along with them, which is why I think these personality inventories have taken on kind of a new life, is that leaders are starting to realize that I've got to get to know these people, because if I don't know them well, I can't lead them well. And so I have to really get to know who they are and what makes them tick. And that's why I think we've seen an upswing in sort of an interest in some of this kind of work, is because I think people understand the value of, you can't lead unless someone's following, and they aren't going to follow unless they have a connection with you somehow. And the leader's job is to make those connections. So I think we are evolving away from maybe that strong dominant style to more of an inclusive style of leadership, and that we value that more, because younger generation folks want to feel like I'm a valuable part of the organization, rather than just I show up, I punch the clock and walk out the door.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's open up for one more. If anybody has one on the chat that they want to ask Rick before we let him go. We're so thankful for the time today to talk about this topic, and it's always interesting. Lisa says in the chat, you said you admire D's as an S, and she said she admires S. So I think she just said she's an ID. So that makes sense.
Right. One of the things that I've said before, John, if wait for maybe one more question if it comes in, but I feel like as a parent, and now my children are adults, but many of you are raising younger children, don't try to change who they are. Like, celebrate who they are, affirm who they are, warn them that if here's who I think you are, and here's some of the challenges you're going to have as a result of that. But I love who you are. We value who you are. I think there's so much potential. I wish I would have been better with our children of affirming who they were, and then warning them or giving them preparation for, but get ready. You're going to have some times when this is going to be hard for you, and here's why. But again, the training has helped me see that more clearly. And now I can start to talk to my adult children about it. And I look at my grandkids and celebrate every one of them for who they are, not for who I want them to be.
That's so great. I love that. And being able to, I think it does help in those tough moments in life when you think, why are they picking on me, or what's wrong with me, or why do I have all the bad luck? Or it could just be a clash of perspective, or just a self-awareness of what's going on in the world. But yeah.
Right.
Well, this has been great. Joe said this has been super insightful. Thank you so much, Rick. We'll put this, the recording up in the community, and anybody can watch it or share it with friends and family. So we'll send you the link. And thanks so much for the time here on the Friday afternoon.
Thanks. I appreciate it, John. Take care.
It's always fun to catch up. All right, everybody, take care. Have a good weekend. Be safe, and we'll see you around. Take care.